So that was, I personally believe, this is my personal belief, that 70 AD was the wrath that they were all talking about. That God's wrath coming on a unbelieving and vile generation came when this was completely and utterly destroyed. So Moses' covenant led to death because the priests in the book of Hebrews, I'm not sure where it says it in Hebrews, but in the book of Hebrews, it talks about this, the covenant is obsolete, and what is obsolete is dying and will soon disappear. Speaking of the priests at the temple, and so the writer of Hebrews fully expected this to disappear based on Jesus' saying that, do you see this temple? Not one stone's going to be on another. It's like it's going to be torn down. I'm going to destroy this temple. And he told them that fact. So Jesus comes in, you can see on my really bad timeline. So those who are of the faith of Abraham are Abraham's children. That's this dotted line down here. So if you have faith in the promises of God, that leads you to Jesus. He's option 2, he's forgiveness. And so you don't have to go into this other place of destruction and stuff. Josephus, who was a Jewish historian who actually lived during 70 AD and was an eyewitness to it and wrote the whole history of it, he said that there was no Christians in Jerusalem at the time, that they had remembered the words of warning of Jesus to get out. When you see, they said, what is the sign of your coming and when is the end? And I believe they were speaking of the end of the Mosaic covenant. What's that sign? And he said, when you see the city surrounded by armies, then get out. And they remembered that he said that. And so they all fled. And so the story goes that there was no Christians in Jerusalem at the time that the army surrounded them, starved them out, eventually burned them to the ground and killed them. And then he also talked about the temple was completely sacked. And kind of on an interesting note, it was very common in that day to bring to the conquering country, Rome, articles of the thing that you conquered. And Josephus said that they brought the candlestick and some different stuff from inside the temple and some of the people who had been in Jerusalem. And the average Roman citizen was absolutely in awe and dumbfounded when they saw the average Roman Israelite, that their clothes were fine, that like the average person dressed in red and purple, which was reserved for royalty. And the average person in Israel had like jewels and gold. And so they had they're bringing these slaves and captives in, and they were just regular people. They were completely emaciated. He said beneath their clothing, they were completely emaciated, but their clothing and how they wore themselves was very wealthy. And the Romans were really surprised by that. So they brought all this gold in, and the citizens who had been used to seeing this kind of thing were really surprised. So it's kind of interesting, just side note of what happened at 70 AD. I think that's it for today as far as the what I studied. I don't know if I should say this today or not. Okay, let me just go back to the cross for just a minute. It's Psalm 22. Jesus quotes it while he's on the cross, and he says, my God, why have you forsaken me?" And they call that psalm is that line, my God, why have you forsaken me, is what some teachers use to teach that God completely rejected Jesus on the cross and turned away from him because he was bearing the sin of mankind, and God can't look upon sin. But in that day, the way the Jews would kind of speak to each other and talk to each other is that they would quote a line of something, like a verse, and the context would be for that person, like it was shorthand. They'd say, my God, why have you forsaken me? Which is a key for that person to like know the whole psalm. So in Psalm 22, he says, can somebody else read this? I have an NASB and it uses the King James words that are kind of hard for me to read. So it's 22:24.
I don't have it.
Stacy, do you have it? 22:24. Can you read it?
Yeah. He does not neglect the poor or ignore their suffering. He does not turn away from them, but answers when they call for help.
That's all of 24. I have more. Neither has he hidden his face from him, but when he cried for him, when he cried for help, he heard. So it starts out, I'm in pain. Why have you forsaken me? But the conclusion of the psalmist is, you heard my cry. You came to help me. And in fact, God did come and help him. So the conclusion that psalm comes to is that God did not turn his face. He turned his face to him. So that's,
mine is the heading on mine of chapter 22. It says, a cry of anguish and a song of praise.
Mm-hmm. So what I was going to, and what I still wonder if I should bring up today, because it's kind of, I understand it. I'll try to help you understand it. I was reading Revelation, and there is a question as to whether or not Revelation is still yet future. And some people say that Revelation is the culmination of the Mosaic covenant when it finally came to an end, and Jesus came and sit as king on the throne. As I was reading it, I got to chapter 15, and the people up in heaven are singing the song of Moses. It says they sang the song of Moses and of the Lamb.
Oh, that's
And
interesting.
I got stuck on that for like a couple days. Like,
Right.
wait a minute, why are they singing the song of Moses? And the whole point, to go back to the song of Moses, Moses is saying, I'm teaching you this song, so when these things happen to you, you'll know what happened. And so I was really like, so I bring that to you to just kind of leave it there. I don't really have a total conclusion. I'm very
This
much
was in
leaning. Revelation 15, they sang the song of Moses and of the Lamb. And the Revelation 15 says what the words of the song of the Lamb are, ostensibly, I guess, because we already know what the song of Moses is.
What song should they be singing?
They sang the song of,
you?
it doesn't puzzle me. It gives more credibility to the idea that what John is describing and what he's seeing is a thing in the past, like the Jews up in heaven saying that God is righteous in destroying his enemies being the one who destroyed the Messiah, the very one came to save the thing. to save Israel, and they rejected him. And Jesus said, all of this will come upon your head. All of the, what did he say? All of the punishment will come upon this generation, from righteous Abel to righteous Zechariah, so A to Z. And you'll be punished for it. And the punishment, the final punishment, the wrath of God is poured out on his enemies, those who rejected Messiah. So I believe that Revelation is talking about that very thing, the destruction of the city of Jerusalem.
I was just going to say, so.
In 70 AD.
Yes.
Wow. So some would say the fulfillment of God's wrath was the cross. You're actually saying the fulfillment was the 70 AD.
That when God kept, like I said, the Old Testament prophets were saying God's wrath is coming.
Right.
And then they got taken away to Babylon. And then the New Testament writers were saying turn from God's wrath, which was the final end of the Mosaic covenant. And Jesus said that that was going to happen in that generation.
Okay.
And
So-
that's Revelation what?
Revelation 15, in which it says that the people in heaven are singing the Song of Moses. And that is it for today, unless there's any questions.
That's a lot of stuff. It's good
Okay.
stuff. Good stuff. Lots to chew on.
Okay, good night.
Yeah.